All right, Jack, folks. So the CDCs are approaching. I know that here in Marion County, it's about a month away. It's a really, really cool time of year where we have our students that compete against each other. Some of our most talented, dedicated students come together and show off their skills together. Um, and we know along with that comes the element of dressing up. And with that, with the young men expected to be in a tie. Um, I'm pretty frequently asked for help with tying ties around this time of year. And honestly, throughout the year with Jack students, since oftentimes when I'm working with our students, I'm in a tie. Makes sense. They'll ask me for help with it. And honestly, for myself, even outside of just Jack and working with students, I'm pretty often asked for help with tying a tie. A lot of times, even with adults that already may know how to tie a tie, but are just looking at ways to make the knot look a little bit more clean, a little bit more neat. So I have some tips in this tutorial. I've looked at a lot of the tutorials on YouTube. I think I have some specific tips that I'll be able to provide in this little tutorial that will make it useful and helpful for people who don't wear ties on a regular basis to get the hang of it pretty easily. The knot I'm going to teach is called the phat knot or the Shelby knot. It's how I most often tie my tie, and there's some very specific advantages that I think there are to learning this way to tie a tie. I actually think it's the most beneficial and easiest way to learn how to tie a tie. It's a very easy knot that can be used very easily with different types of ties, different textures, different materials, and you can really easily as well adjust this knot so it's the proper size for the spread of your collar. Spread meaning the size of that gap that you have in your shirt um, that you'll be putting the tie in. So with that, I'm at about 2 minutes already. I'll stop rambling and go ahead and get into how to do this. So I do have a pink and blue tie. I think it's a tie that's colorful. Will make it pretty easy for you to see the tie and also see what it is I'm doing with the tie. If you notice, I don't have a dress shirt. I don't think that will matter for this. I decided to go ahead and do this representing with my Jag and Deanna polo. So first thing, notice that the seam is up, which is backwards from how most people will tie a tie. You don't want it this way. This is the normal way, if you want to call it that. We're going to flip that seam up so that it's pointing up towards the sky or pointing out. All right, after that, what you will do, take the thin end of the tie and cross it over. And this is one of the most important steps of tying a tie and getting a good clean knot. Make sure that when you make this V, I call it making the V, that it's up against the neck and that you do not have it down like this. If you do it like this, your knot is not going to be neat or clean. It's impossible if you start like this. It's going to end up really, really awkward, and you usually end up with a knot that's really, really big. Not only big, but just, again, sloppy. So get it up against it. Then after that, what you're going to do is take this part, I call this the tuck and pull, the wide end of the tie, tuck it around your loop, and pull it all the way. One thing you'll want to make sure you're doing when you do that tuck and pull is this little loop that I've made, make sure that's smooth. Make that as smooth as possible. So no crinkles, and you want to get it nice and smooth. And if you need to loosen it up to make it smooth and then just tighten it back up, that is completely okay. After you make that loop with your tuck and pull, take this thin end of the tie. Take this thin end of the tie and put it down the center of your body. It will make it easier to form your knot if you go ahead and center this now as opposed to having this over here trying to form your knot. Go ahead and put this down the center. And then we're going to start forming our knot by taking the wide end, bring it over the front of our center part here. And then afterwards taking that and tucking it behind everything. It's another tuck and pull. Similar to before. You see how this is right now? You don't want this. We need to make sure we straighten this out. Straighten this out, make it nice and smooth. All right. Then what we'll do is we'll take our index finger, open up that knot. And a lot of people will also, when they do this, they try to hold this open with the index finger. That's a lot more difficult. You don't need to do that. Instead of doing that, open it up with the index finger, slide the thumb under to hold that knot open, and then go ahead and stuff that through there. Now what we're going to do is, to lock this knot in, we'll hold the thin part of the tie that's behind the wide part and pull down on the wide part. And I like to dimple my tie. Dimple just means putting that little dent down the middle of the tie, so I'm going ahead and dimple it. I do it by putting my index finger in the middle of the tie and pinching it with my middle finger and my thumb. But back to locking this knot in. Hold the thin part, pull the wide part. That's how you lock that knot in, so when you slide it up, it stays nice and clean. Alright, and then if you want to, sometimes what I'll do is, I'm going to lock that in a little bit better. To make it a little bit more triangular, you can pull on the sides and then go ahead and slide it up. And so that's how you do that. You see, it's a pretty good knot. It's nice and clean, nice and neat. There's no folds, no wrinkles in it. We'll go over that one more time. Make sure you have a tie. If you can too, go ahead and grab a tie and do this with me. A lot easier to learn if you're doing it with me as opposed to just watching me go over it. So, got a little bit of a cold, excuse me. One thing you'll want to keep in mind as well is when you're starting your tie, the longer that you have the wide end of the tie, the smaller that your knot will be. It's kind of a backwards or inverse relationship. The longer that you have the thin end of the tie, the bigger that your knot will end up being. And I wear knots of various sizes depending again on my shirt collar spread and also whether or not I'm wearing a vest. When I'm wearing a vest, I tend to like to make the knot a little bit bigger. And I like wearing vests. But back to this. So we've got this. First step, to make that V, right? And again, that V is up against the neck. It's not like this. It's up against the neck. All right. Next thing we're going to do is our tuck and pull. We're going to tuck the fat end of the tie, or the wide end of the tie, and pull it all the way through, making sure that this little loop right here, that there's no crinkles in it. It's nice and smooth, even if sometimes happens where you've got to loosen that up to smooth it out. And go ahead and make it up, put it back up against the neck. After that, what we will do is what I call a crossover. We're taking that wide end of the tie, bringing it over the front of this part, centered, so that we begin making our knot. Then we're going to, still holding on to that wide part, take it and tuck it behind everything. And it happens a lot. Make sure that we straighten that out just like we did with our loop. Make sure that's nice and straight. Afterwards, open with the index finger, hold open with the thumb. Now we're going to lock that knot in by holding the thin end of the tie. And again, I like to dimple. Dimple is not necessary. I just think it makes the tie look more distinguished. But hold this end of the tie. And we're going to pull the fat end. Make sure you don't pull too hard. You don't need to pull too hard. Just a good tug. And there's a knot. And I've got a double dimple, which some people do like that. I've seen Steve Harvey sometimes does that double dimple. I don't care for that double dimple, so I want to get that out of there. Just fix that a little bit. And lock in my knot. Alright. So there's the knot. Something else, I'm going to go through this a few more times, so we're going over it together. So it's kind of a small detail thing that I kind of like to do. But we're starting over again. Alright, so cross thin end over fat end. Make the V, make sure it's close up against the neck. Tuck and pull, so tucking this end of the tie. And pulling it, straighten that out. So it's nice and neat, no folds, no crinkles on that loop. The crossover, and tuck behind everything. Something that a lot of the times when you see people tie the Pratt or the Shelby, they have the seam facing out like this, which a lot of times doesn't matter. But for me, I have some ties that don't have this loop right here. They don't have that loop. And so what happens is that if your tie, the front of your tie moves around a little bit, if you're not wearing a tie clip or a tie chain, then when people see this part of the tie, the seam is facing out. I just kind of don't like that. It's a very minute detail. So what you can do is you can actually turn that seam so that it faces that way, and it will not affect your knot at all. I like to do that a lot. Now we're back to this part where we're going to open this up, The index finger, hold it open with the thumb. This knot is going to be super small. I tied this way too little. But it doesn't matter for the purpose of the tutorial. So like I said, I've turned that seam this time. I like to do that a lot. And then I'll go back to our dimple where I get tuck my index finger, pinch with the middle finger and the thumb, and lock that knot in by holding this part and pulling that part of the tie down. That's how you lock that knot in so it's nice and clean when you slide it up. And you can see I have a very small knot here, which again doesn't matter for the purpose of this. And if you want to tuck that little part into that loop so that it doesn't move on you, that works too. And that's what that loop is for. I'm right at about 11 minutes. We'll go through this again. Hopefully you're doing this with me, you're getting the hang of it. It's a lot fewer steps. If you're a person that's tried to tie a full Windsor knot, or even just a half Windsor, it should be a lot easier. It's also a lot easier to maneuver the knot using these knots as opposed to those traditional Windsor knots. And I'm going to show how to tie those and show the difference. And also what I feel the disadvantages of those are, particularly if you're a tall gentleman like myself, or if you're a stockier build with a bigger neck. Those Windsor knots use so much more of the tie, it almost makes it so that you have to get tall ties or extra length ties in order to tie the symmetrical knots. This eliminates that need for the most part. I'm about 6'5". I have about 60 ties, 60 to 70 ties, and I only have about maybe 5 or 6 tall ties. So I end up not needing them, not having to go through that process of hunting them down, spending more money since the ties are made of more fabric by using this way of tying the tie. So back to the knot. All right, we've got it ready to go. Thin end over big end. Straighten it out a little bit so my knot's not super small again. All right, thin end over big end. We've got the V up against the neck, the tuck and pull. So tuck and pull. Make sure that this is nice and smooth here. That little loop, I want that nice and smooth. We're going to tighten it back up, center this part of the tie, the crossover. Then we're taking this part and tucking it behind everything. Again, we want to see, like I've got that crinkle right there. You don't want that when you tie the knot. So let's go ahead and pull that, or when you start to finish the knot. Make that nice and smooth. Index finger, pointer finger, whichever one you want to call it. Open up that knot, slip the thumb under there. And you'll see again, see that seam is turned out. I like to add this little step where I turn that around. I just like it better. You gotta figure out which way it turns more naturally. I turned it the wrong way at first. I like to turn that around before. Excuse me. Also make sure that you don't pull this part too much before you actually form your knot. Some people will yank this part down too soon. So let's go ahead and form our knot. Make sure it's nice and neat first. Then hold the thin end. Turn it around on me again. And I'm going to pull that knot down to lock that in. And if you do this the right way, what happens is when you slide that knot up, it stays nice and neat. It doesn't start to come undone on you at all. And again, my final step, I like to a lot of times pull these sides just to make that a little bit more triangular. And you can see that's a pretty good. Now I've got some wrinkles in that too. Like if you're kind of like me, I'm more picky. Sometimes I might retie that. So I've got some crinkle in that knot, and I like it to be nice and really, really clean. But it's not bad. You can get away with that, obviously. So here's some things I want to show. I have some different material ties. One of the ones that I'm going to pull is I've got this tie that's made out of a lot more of a thick wool. I don't know if you can see that, but that's almost like a cotton wool material. And so if you're a person that's tying aside of the fact that it takes more of a tie, so let's just tie a double Windsor knot really quickly. I'm not trying to teach this, I'm just going to do it. So the double Windsor is, we've got the tie flipped the other way. What we'll do is we will wrap, go behind. Again, this is not for teaching purposes. I'm just doing this to show. And notice how much more of the tie I've used already tying the tie that way. I've already wrapped it twice. I'm going around to wrap it again before I actually can go to my part where I open it up and finish it. I got some goofy stuff going on with that. But this is the full Windsor tie. So the knot is a lot more difficult to manipulate, and especially when you've got the ties made out of this heavier fabric, this heavier material, the knot is a lot more stiff. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm having to fight with this a lot more. And I can even, somebody might say, well, you tied a double Windsor. What if you just do a half or a single Windsor? You still end up with the same thing because of the tension you create when you make your knot. You see, even pulling this off. And with that too, I do recommend really caution against, a lot of people untie ties by just pulling that tendon out of the tie. Obviously that works, but you really can mangle your ties very quickly. It's a lot harder on the tie. You can warp the shape of it, destroy the silk or whatever the tie is made of doing that. So it's a lot better for the tie, if you want to preserve it and keep your ties looking nice longer, to go ahead and untie that knot the proper way. By just taking the time to do that, your ties will look nice a lot longer. So I'm using the same tie. I want to show you, going back to the method that I was teaching, and I'm hoping that you'll try. Back to the Shelby or the Pratt, whichever you'd like to call it. I want you to notice the difference and how much easier it is for me to maneuver this knot. Smooth that out. Again, you all know these steps. You all are pros at this by now, right? Everybody could probably teach me how to do this now. Not a little on the small side again, but I want you just to see that I'm not going to make the knot really look too pretty. I just want you to see the difference. But look how much easier that knot is moving. Look how much easier that is. Now remember when I tied that double Windsor? There's no way I could slide that easily. It's a lot easier to maneuver that knot. And I even think as you're going for different size knots, it's easier to gauge how much of the tie, how you want to position the tie to get the knot size that you want. It's a lot easier. And just to even show you again, because some people will say, well, you tied a double Windsor, so what if you just do a single Windsor or half Windsor? Okay, let's do that. So you know with the half, if you're a tie tire, you already know what you'll do is you wrap this part around, go here, cross. This is still a good knot. I used to tie my tie like this. Probably the first symmetrical knot I learned, but I like sometimes bigger knots, so that's why I went ahead and learned how to tie that double. But even with this, you all, that there's still a lot more fighting that you have to do with the tie, because you've got more of that tie twisted and packed in under that knot. And this is not bad. It still moves easier than the double, but it's still a lot harder to finagle. And again, so when you've got the thicker ties like this one, again, made out of kind of that cotton wool, on the back of this it says 63% viscose, 37% silk. Anyways, a thicker material, it's just harder. It's even harder to untie the knot. So one more time to wrap this up, as I'm at about 19 minutes. That last knot I did show, though, that single Windsor, I'll be honest, sometimes if you've got a tie with a more slipperier material like this one I'm going to show, you may feel like it's easier to get that knot to lock in a little bit better using the Windsor. But just to show you that this still works pretty well, even with the slippery, so-called slippery tie, as some people call them. This is made out of kind of a really satiny sheen type material. So I'll just show you the Pratt will still work with this. You see I've got that seam up. I'm going to go ahead and go through this. Hopefully they're doing it with me. Slow it down again. The V up against the neck. Then we're going to do our tuck and pull. Make sure that that loop we just made is nice and smooth. Tighten it up against the neck. Center this. Cross over. And what we want to do is tuck that behind everything. It's another tuck and pull. Make sure that's nice and smooth. Open up with the index. hold open with the thumb. And also too, when we're finishing that knot, we want to make sure that that part is smooth too. All those, making sure stuff is smooth is how you get a clean knot. And then, you know, I like to dimple, so got my pointer finger in the middle of that, middle finger on one side, thumb on the other, hold the thin end still, lock that in. Knot moves so much easier with the phat, so much easier. And you can see this is a slippery tie, or one of those satin ties where sometimes the knots want to slide out a little bit more, but you can see if you lock that knot in using my suggestion where you hold that thin end. I'm going to turn this around again so my seam is pointing towards me. Just a little thing I like to do. But if you hold that in and lock that knot in, that knot will still stay, even with using the phat or the Shelby. Even using this method on a satin or a sheen, I'm sorry, kind of a sheen, those sheen material ties. Just so you can see the difference. So I'll bring it up close, as opposed to a tie like this, where it's more of just a traditional silk, or that cotton tie that you all saw me working with. It still works. So I didn't want to make this any longer than a half an hour. I know most classes are barely much longer than that, a lot of them. So hopefully you all went through this, you gained from it. I'm also making a Microsoft sway tutorial to accompany this, so you can go through the steps on your own. Should be useful. Just remember the big things are making sure that those folds, those loops you make are smooth. Making sure you keep the tie up against your neck, especially when you start that V, not down here, but up against the neck. And that you lock it in by holding that thin end, pulling that wide end down, and you'll end up with good knots. You know, just get your muscle memory going, practice it a few times, and everybody will be professional tie tiers. So thanks for checking it out. Hopefully it was useful. Feel free to hit me up with feedback, comments, suggestions, anything you'd like for me to go over again, and I'll make sure to do that. All right. Good luck everybody at the CDC. See you later.